We're going to start with our news review program. The Yemeni government has condemned the execution of 10 prisoners of the army and popular committees by Saudi mercenaries in the port city of Hodeidah. The head of the Committee for Prisoners' Affairs of the National Salvation Government said he has precise information about those behind the execution. Abdul Qadir Murtaza added that Yemen has submitted a protest note and a report to the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the International Committee of the Red Cross regarding the execution. The Yemeni committee, in a statement, slammed the killing of the prisoners by a firing squad on Saturday. It said, quote, "Such a brutal behavior is against the most basic human rights." It also stressed that such acts are a scandal by the mercenaries and their backers, including Washington and Riyadh. Joining us is Edward Corrigan, international lawyer and political analyst from London, Ontario, and we also have Tony Gosling, investigative journalist from the British city of Bristol. Gentlemen, welcome. Edward, I guess I'll start with you as an international lawyer and just checking the legalities of all this. The summary execution of POWs, is that a war crime?
Most certainly it is. You cannot execute prisoners for no legitimate reason. And as far as I know, there's been no express charges. They seem to be, just prisoners of war, and you have to guard prisoners of war under the Geneva Convention, and it clearly is a war crime. So, and you have, also we're stepping away. This is, I guess, a civil war where you've got actually, not one but three competing governments all claiming to represent Yemen. The government that controls Sana'a, the former capital, is the Ansarallah movement and the Hutus. And, they took over the city whenever Hadi resigned and left the country. Now the Saudis are trying to push him back in. And of course there was Abdullah Saleh before that, who actually died in the war. So you've got three competing factions. And then there's a section down in Aden that wants to break away what used to be southern Yemen from the main part of Yemen. So they're all claiming to be the government. But it clearly is a war crime. You cannot execute prisoners. And it's also, the timing is very bad because there is talk of peace negotiations going on between the parties. And this is just like throwing gasoline on a fire, or maybe even nitroglycerin into a fire.
So, Tony,
sorry, we've just got the clock going off here.
As long as
late, yeah. I mean,
the chimes of Big Ben going off at Tony's house. Tony,
that's right.
Let me put my question.
Give you my thoughts on this story, because I think the key point here is we know from the Saudi record that the regime there is not really representing the population, and we have had here in the UK today a very important annual ceremony in Whitehall at the Cenotaph, with hundreds of soldiers and veterans, including Prince Charles, the heir to the throne, Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, all the heads of the British Armed Forces, paying tribute to the fallen so-called heroes of the British past. Now, I think that this was a completely justified ceremony to take place back in the days after the Second World War, with the defeat of Adolf Hitler by the Russians mainly, but also the British too. But when it comes to today, the British are actually contributing to the misery in Yemen, and to have mainly through arms companies and arms sales, but also through the British Armed Forces actually assisting the Saudis in the cowardly bombing campaign of this the poorest country in the Middle East. So I think what we're witnessing now is a kind of turning around from the heroes of the previous World War II, and this actually is understood by many Brits too, that the actions of the West in Yemen have been absolutely so desperately appalling as to turn these tributes to previous fallen soldiers from the Second World War, etc., into actually rather hideous parodies of the sort of thing that they're supposed to be. And the actions of the Saudis in Yemen, the British are very, very much in bed with the Saudi government. In fact, it would be probably very difficult for the Saudi regime to carry on if it wasn't for support from the United States and Britain, because there's very little genuine support. But most of the support from the population comes through either through bribery from money, because of the vast amounts of wealth that the ruling family, the royal family, control, or fear of speaking their mind, etc. So I think it's quite clear about rights. I think we need to be talking about things like right and wrong, good and evil in these sorts of situations, because that's what I see playing out. And slowly but surely, those wicked countries that are perpetrating wars, that are trying to steal resources, control the world through fear, and bombing campaigns, this kind of thing, are being clearly shown to be who they are. For example, the Russians are not doing this, the Chinese are not doing this, the Americans and the Brits and the Saudis are. And the Israelis, what I see is a potential conflict coming down the line between Arab countries and Israel, which is effectively a kind of crusader state set up by the British and the Americans after the war. So I think particularly these kinds of incidents need to be prosecuted very, very well. We will hear virtually nothing about this in the Western press, because for them it's the wrong story and it shows the lie of the British support for the Saudi government.
Okay, Tony, very quickly. So Edward has clarified that a war crime has taken place. Do you think the Yemeni call on international organizations to take action will fall on deaf ears, or will it bring justice to the perpetrators and those, as you say, not just the Saudi Arabia and the United States, but also Britain?
Well, yes, 10 soldiers executed. The point is you're making there is a very important one. The International Criminal Court, etc., are they fit for purpose? And I'm afraid the answer is almost certainly no, they're not, because before they launch these sorts of campaigns, bit by bit, the United States, NATO and the Western countries have done everything they possibly can to control those international bodies. And I think, for example, here in the European Union, there is an enormous battle about who controls the judiciary right now going on between Warsaw and Brussels in Poland, about who appoints Polish judges. Is it done the Brussels way, or is it done the Warsaw way? And I think what we've witnessed across the world since Nuremberg, a slow descent of the ability of appointed judges in the judicial system to do its job. Here in Britain, we have a criminal justice system which is not fit for purpose anymore, because only if there is any political implication in any kind of trial, as we've seen, for example, with Julian Assange, the perpetrators, if you want, get their way. So justice is not done, and once justice is not done, what happens is the populations stop supporting their own governments, and that's happening here in the West and clearly in Saudi Arabia too.
Interesting, Tony. Final word to Edward. Edward, do you think that the perpetrators will get, as Tony says, will they escape this any punishment?
Unfortunately, what Tony says is correct. The International Criminal Court doesn't have a police force or an army to enforce its decision. They can embarrass people and publicize it, but and it's unlikely that these people will be imprisoned unless, of course, they fall in the hands of the government based in Sana'a. Then I'm sure there would be probably a trial and justice carried out. You have sometimes the justice system does work. For example, the Julian Assange, the first court would not allow him to be extradited to the United States for good reason, but the British government and the Americans are appealing that, trying to overturn that decision. So sometimes surprisingly enough, the justice system does work, but many times it does not. It bows to power, it has bias, and it tends to cover up, state crimes and torture, war crimes, etc., that are done in, and they bring in defense like national security and stuff like that. So unfortunately, the system is being distorted, and yes, most of these people probably will never see justice done.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. Let me thank our guests for their contribution. Edward Corrigan, international lawyer and political analyst, joining us from London, Ontario. Tony Gosling is an investigative journalist, joining us out of the British city of Bristol. That brings an end to this edition of the News Review.